Okay, it is 6 o'clock by the bell across the street. Call the meeting to order as posted in the town clerk's office for October the 18th at 6 o'clock. Having said that, all rise for the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our agenda this evening is approval of minutes from October the 4th, 2023. Superintendent's report, Assistant Superintendent and Director of Finance and Operations. Are you going to do her report for her or just skip it?
I'll skip it tonight, but I'll comment on her being out.
School committee member reports, citizens' requests, international trip discussion, one for April of 2024 to France, and the other is in the spring of 2025 to Spain. Final reading and approval of policy updates for tiered review, DESI changes. And that will deal with policy JJE, co-curricular and extracurricular activities, Westborough Elementary School Handbook, Mill Pond Handbook, the Handbook for GMS, and WHS Handbook. Budget presentation number 1, first enrollment update presentation, and a debrief on town meeting. Adjournment would follow that. We don't have any reason for an executive session tonight, so that will be it. So let's start with the minutes. Is there a motion on the minutes?
I have a question. Was anyone able to read the minutes? Were you able to read the minutes? Only because what's linked here on the agenda is the agenda, not the minutes.
Oh,
So I think it was just
I didn't see that.
yeah, the final agenda that came through has the agenda linked where it says October 4th.
Why don't you pass over it
Yeah,
for
can we
now,
just
and
pass
then
on
what we
that?
can do is pass over it for now, and I'll go into the folder, and if it's in there, she just might have not cleared the link before she did the other link.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I'll link it while Daniel's
It
presenting.
is linked now, but if you haven't read it, then yeah.
Okay, so if we could,
Maybe we could take a short break sometime
both.
at the end of the meeting and just, the meeting
Just move it
minute
to the end. I
pages
like
are
that.
only-
we can add them to
Yeah, yeah.
next. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
so what do you want to do? Do you want to spend a minute or two reading the minutes, or do you want to pass and do it next time?
I can spend a minute or two reading the minutes. So
Okay.
Carry on. Thank you.
I guess we're going to deal with them later then. Having said that, superintendent's report, please.
Thank you. As I told you when I arrived, I appreciated the opportunity to have you dismiss me from town meeting because I wasn't feeling well, thank you. And town meeting moved forward successfully. We always consider it successful when it completes in one night. And I know you have an opportunity to discuss that when we get to the open session if you want to kind of process any of that. Couple highlights this week that I want to call out. I had the opportunity, I want to thank Kristen for joining me. We presented Citizens Academy, and that's the citizens course that's provided, hosted by the town, where all of the major boards in the town are presenting how they work, the process, how to participate, and taking questions from the class, the group. And Kristen, I think it's like a group of 14. I think we're 14
Yeah, it's like
of them.
14 or 16.
Really nice group, very, very engaged. Just a really good group of people who were there to learn, participate, and are becoming kind of connected themselves, which is nice. We shared the evening with libraries and youth and family services, so they kind of cluster them together. And I think I shared the presentation to you. It was really an opportunity for us to kind of explain the structure of the differences in the boards that work in town and the process. They asked great questions, and it was just a really engaging evening. So Kristen, really walked them through all the key pieces, and it was a really good night. And if you have other comments, you can add them when we get there. I think we should continue that. I think it really broadens the range of, we have a high schooler in there too, so I just wanted to say, it was a really diverse age group and just a whole range of really neat people. I know, I'm assuming Hallie will talk about, you're gonna talk about homecoming? Sure. All right, I'll let you talk about how awesome homecoming was. And I would mention that concerts are starting, so you're starting to see a transition. Two things start to happen. The pace of the year moves very quickly. You're into mid-October, and fall season is quickly moving towards playoffs and completion, and winter sports are already queuing up and getting ready to start thinking about playing. And so you also have the fall concert season starting, and so the first musical concert is Thursday. So as you just look at the pace of the year, lots of good things going on. And I just want to continue to comment on how enjoyable the school year has been thus far. I was over at Hastings today and have been to the high school and was at Mill Pond yesterday. And just everything feels very smooth, the rhythm of the year. It just is really enjoyable to watch our classrooms functioning. This past week, I'm trying to continue on our goals of more shared content around what's going on in our schools. And I shared a bunch of pictures around science across the district that went out across the district. And if you didn't have a chance to look at that, I think it's good when you can kind of take those in. We got some nice feedback on that. There were some great snapshots of some DNA and different like bio labs at the high school, which were really interesting. And then science all the way across the district taking place. I love our science. It's very hands-on. It shows like kids using balls and ramps in the hallway and conducting experiments. So I hope the photos really give people that glimpse inside, and then I try to put a little commentary. We also released our next superintendent spotlight, and it was on all things literacy K-6, and pushed that out. I just want to give a shout out to Stephanie Nephew and Christina Cooney, the two literacy specialists who cover K-8 at pre-K to 8, and they did an amazing job. They're really enjoyable to listen to. If you haven't had a chance to listen to that, I think it'd be good if you find some time to kind of, you can speed up through different parts too, so it's perfect, and you can kind of shorten it. But I think as of today, there have been like 250 views, so I feel like it's reaching the people looking at content the way we wanted them to, and I think the homework video had like 730 views. So, you're reaching a group of people that are starting to get immersed in hearing about what the schools are doing. So I feel good about those goals. I'll keep you updated on them. And we encourage people, if you watch the video and have questions, you can email us, or if you have ideas about what kind of shows you want to see things about the inside of the schools, just let us know. So that's my report for tonight.
Daniel?
Good evening. Couple of updates. One having to do with literacy, and if for those who are not going to watch the video, just one thing that is new this year for the K-3 parents is that the phonics program now has a digital, like a screener that we've been doing the screener for several years, but we have a policy that we're implementing for the first time, where if a child is flagged on the screener as being below benchmark in terms of their performance, the parents will be discussing that with the teachers at the conferences next week when we start to do parent conferences. They will get a report showing how their students scored on phonics, different dimensions that are measured on that screener. And so we also will provide details about how we will be tracking that through the year to measure progress. It's not unusual for students to start out the year in a place where they get flagged, and then by the end of the year end up being at grade level. But we're doing this in part because it's best practice. We're also doing it because the state is requiring a different kind of screening as far as phonics is concerned. So the other thing I wanted to give you just an inform, as I was talking to our world language director today, and I thought this was kind of a cool, interesting innovation that we're putting in at the high school, where we got a Westborough Education Foundation grant to basically, have the concept of pen pals. Well, with pen pals is old old hat. At this point, it's Video Pals. And so we have 5 classrooms that are in the world language department that are going to be communicating with students in other countries. And so we've set up these just on time. A world language teacher just entered, and so she could probably articulate some of this better than me. But we have relationships that we're going to have with students in West Africa and Senegal and Argentina and Mexico. And what the students do is they learn how to, they talk in the native language and then exchange video chats back and forth with them. I think it's an 8-week kind of program that we're putting in. So we're piloting it, and the Westborough Education Foundation, this is what they help us do, is launch things that we don't currently have in the budget that they give us sort of seed money to do. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. That's my report.
I would just comment briefly for the Director of Finance and Operations. Anita Patel is out sick today. She's actually injured. She broke a leg, and she's going to be out for the next probably 2 weeks working from home, first recovering, and then she broke it badly, so recovering some, and by next week would start some work from home. And then when she feels ready, either to manage a wheelchair, different things she needs to manage, we'll have her return to office. But for now, I'll be collaborating with her on the initial next steps towards budget presentations. Be working in Zoom with different people to get started. So just wanted to comment why she's not here.
School committee reports, Hallie?
So Friday we had our homecoming dance, and that was a lot of fun. And then Saturday morning we had a great homecoming festival, and a lot of the high school clubs raised a lot of money, so that was really exciting. And then a lot of our sports teams have had their senior nights.
Cool.
Nothing to report tonight.
Kristen?
Yes, I just want to address something that was said about me at our October 4th meeting during citizens' requests. So during Mr. Noonan's citizens' request comments, he said it was his understanding that I work in business development for a firm that deals with SEL. I just want to take the opportunity to correct that information. I work for a nonprofit organization, and I'm the director of marketing for program development. The business development and sales department of my organization is completely separate from the team that I work with. I'm not involved with any contracts or financial transactions at my place of employment. I'd be happy to talk with anyone who wants to learn more about my work and my career. My email address is vincentk@westboroughk12.org, and anyone can make an appointment to talk with me. Happy to talk about the work that I do. The best people to answer questions about what is specifically taught in the classrooms of the Westborough Public Schools are our teachers, administrators, and the superintendent. Thanks.
Nothing to report.
Just a reminder that next Wednesday, October 25th, will be the tiered focus monitoring parent orientation. It's held via Zoom. The link is available on the Westborough CPAC page, or you can email and get the link if you email westboroughcpac@gmail.com, and it's also available on the webpage, westboroughcpac.us.
Mr. Chair, can I add one other comment I should have thought to add? I feel like without Sarah DeLay, we forget. She was always our fundraising arm of reminding people what's going on in the community. So just a shout out to our wider community. The annual Turkey Trot is posted online and is always the Saturday before Thanksgiving. And it's just an amazingly enjoyable community event sponsored by an independent organization who pulled that together. And the funds support a whole array of different types of school-based organizational work. And it's really turned into an amazing event, and this is their 10th annual. We also have Dig Pink on Friday. For anybody in this community who's never had the opportunity to see our volleyball team play, they are really doing amazingly well, as are many of our teams. Our women's soccer team is really amazing. Our football team is having a winning season at 5-1. So it's a really enjoyable fall season thing to come out and be a member of the community and to experience the schools and what we contribute. The Dig Pink is Friday, and it's a cancer awareness fundraiser. Our teams, our schools, our clubs do a tremendous amount of volunteer fundraising. So annually, I think Roger has raised over $50,000 in the time he has done this for the Dig Pink Cancer organization that they work with. And so that's coming up on Friday. It's well worth a visit to see that experience. You also have WASA is doing WASA is one of the Westborough Social Athletic Association. Great group of men who give that money right back to scholarships to students annually, $1,500 scholarships, right back to our graduating seniors to help leverage a successful start to school. And they're doing a rowing competition on November 4th. I am rowing as with a team called Rowing for Rangers with some other people who are in even like really good shape, so that I just don't want to embarrass myself. But that's coming up, and there's information on the website about that, and that's a fun one to come out to. That's gonna be a fun community event. So, and then you have all sorts of other fundraising going on that's happening at the individual schools with their fall festivals. All of that fall fundraising kind of feeds the arm of all that work all year, and I just want to commend the immense arm of volunteers that exist in this vibrant community that get such amazing things happening and also provide a lot of fun for people. So this past weekend, there was just a slew of really great stuff going on. So look on the websites, watch the notices. If you don't want to row, you can give money to different teams. If you don't want to run, you can walk the turkey trot. Some people even bring their dogs and they walk with their pets. So anyway, I want to give a shout out to the volunteer organizations that are driving all that. So thank you.
Okay, well, my report tonight is on two issues. One is the chillers at the high school contract is complete and ready to sign. It has been reviewed by council and has been issued by the facilities department. At this point, the funding for it is ARPA money that was granted by the Board of Selectmen. So we're ready to go, and as soon as we get it signed, they'll start. That work should be completed by September of 2024. The other piece is that on the failed school issue, Gilbane, the construction project manager, who is basically the organizer of all the contracts and the funding, which we pay through Gilbane for subcontractors, et cetera, has been settled. The amount of money has been agreed to. I believe the check will be written tomorrow, and that will end expenditures as far as Gilbane is concerned. That will, with a bunch of paperwork, get us in the position to get the final payment from the MSBA, which is probably pushing $750,000. So at that, we have more or less finished paying money for it, and we have come in under budget. And when we get through with all the paperwork, I'll report what our actual end product was in terms of cost of the building versus what the town had approved. So I think it will be a very interesting discussion when we can speak to that, which may take a while because MSBA paperwork is kind of, well, it's
Cumbersome.
bureaucratic.
It's cumbersome and tedious, but it gives you the money.
That's it. We'll take the money, though, when it
Yeah,
comes.
exactly.
Okay, with that, we'll deal with the citizens' request, and if, Kristen, you could read the school committee policy,
Sure.
and then I'll identify who would like to speak to us, and the order of speaking will be from front to back. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. So before we begin, we will remind everyone of the school committee policy regarding citizens' requests. You must be a current resident of Westborough. Speakers can address the school committee about issues within the school committee's purview and authority. Each speaker will be allowed up to 3 minutes to speak to the school committee. And written comments longer than 3 minutes may be presented to the presiding chair before or after the meeting. You're welcome to hand the chair additional comments in writing now or send them via email. The chair will share them with other school committee members. Public comment by residents at this meeting is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between individuals and the school committee. It's an individual's opportunity to express an opinion on issues within the school committee's authority. Our role is to listen carefully to what you have to share with us. Clapping, cheering, calling out, or any other noise during or following a speaker is not allowed. At the close of citizens' requests, school administrators may address what was shared by the speakers if they wish to do so. Additional individual follow-up with a speaker may take place in the days or weeks following a school committee meeting. When you come forward, please state your full name and street address and speak directly into the microphone.
Could I see raised hands as to who would like to speak? 2, 3, 4. Boyd, please come up.
Boyd Conklin, 8 Water Street. Hello, groomers. It's time to get gender influencers out of schools and stop the mass social contagion that is harming children, young adults, and families. So I've rebuttal to your rebuttal last time, and I've got a Flickr site that I've linked to in that rebuttal, but anyways, it's Boyd Conklin at Flickr. There's 86 photographs that I took at the high school of all this LGBT iconography, posters, murals that are 30 feet long, and this kind of thing. So mass hysteria is a diagnostic term used to characterize unexplained outbreaks or epidemics of subjective somatic complaints among students or other vulnerable people that seem to have no physical, biological, or etiological causes. Trans-identifying children are suffering with this mass hysteria. The fact that there has been a rapid 5,000 increase in the number of adolescents identifying as trans and that experts are not questioning it, it should be a concern for all parents. I'm not looking to marginalize the LGBT. I am looking to get you guys to quit lionizing them. It is most definitely a concern for those of us who do. Families' lives were upended when their children, without any gender confusion in childhood, suddenly told them they are the opposite sex. Mass hysteria has taken hold of our children, especially in schools. We watch in horror as everyone celebrates their harm. Here's a line from a movie that has become famous: "If you build it, they will come." In 2007, Boston's Children's Hospital opened the first gender clinic for children in the United States. It is now estimated that there are over 300 pediatric gender clinics in the U.S. Young, vulnerable adults over 18 can also obtain gender-affirming hormones at Planned Parenthood, college campuses, and online. And they can obtain these non-FDA-approved drugs after just one visit without a letter from a doctor or a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. As transgender people are increasingly celebrated at school, in the media, and by politicians, the incidences of trans-identifying children also increase. Obviously, this phenomenon is socially influenced and has become contagious. If children and mature adults make the decision to transition, should we celebrate? Who would wish a lifetime of drugs and surgery on anyone? Social influence is well documented in history and books. Crazy Like Us, Ethan Waters describes how anorexia spread in Hong Kong once it was introduced 2 decades after it became known in America. In America, transgender was a rare condition. It has since doubled in recent years, according to Jean Martin Charlotte's investigation, Hysteria. Hysteria can take on the qualities of social contagion, which the abilities to manifest and spread over populations by way of mere suggestion. This would explain how suggestible the internet is. One son's friend said he realized he was trans after seeing a meme online. In Lee Daniels Krevitz's book, Strange Contagion, he writes, while the strange contagion is perfectly capable of causing contagious...
Boyd.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for your service.
Okay.
So that's the same thing as an email, or that's different?
Yes.
I don't need
And I got it already. Thank you. We can just have one at a time. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Susan Reynolds from 50 Upton Road. We'd like to thank Amber and Daniel for taking the time to respond to the concerns raised by parents at the September 20th meeting of this committee. At the subsequent meeting on the 4th, We, the parents, appreciated your efforts to allay our concerns. However, it did not invalidate many of our concerns, and that is why we are back again. During your 35-minute presentation, you identified 4 main themes. We agree that there are many societal forces that are contributing to the deterioration of mental health of students, and there's a strong link to social media. That point was well taken. Societal forces also contribute to the gender identity challenge now impacting children of all ages. And perhaps the Westborough Public Schools are not the primary cause. As you defended the faculty and teachers that they are not groomers, what struck us was the implicit message negating what had been said by the parents. Gender confusion is influenced by the use of pronouns, inviting LGBTQ+ clubs or outside LGBTQ+ organizations to the school or town events, and assuring that material and books, as well as special meeting rooms, are available to our students. At some point, we parents hope to better understand how those topics are addressed by the schools under social emotional learning, as SEL was repeated multiple times in the strategic plan documents. In addition to a third theme, the concern that Westborough Public Schools' academic rigor has declined, we were pleased to have heard Westborough performance standards based on MCAS scores remain strong and in the top 3%. Thank you. So we felt it important to acknowledge several of your points in this open meeting. You and Daniel demonstrated considerable thought and care in your presentation. This evening, we would like to focus on the statement or theme you titled as Westborough Public Schools is indoctrinating students with leftist ideologies. This rebuttal is specific to legitimate concerns of parents that was delivered several weeks ago when we stated that focusing on DEI ideology confuses the child and undermines the parents. I personally have several friends who have had their relationship with their young adult children devolve based on DEI ideologies. Parents have a critical perspective, and we want to use the global studies part of this presentation to show this. We appreciate that you are proud of your faculty, yet you may be unaware that there are faculty delivering culturally manipulated curriculum. We agree teaching and administration is a human process, but what is the foundation? The checks and balances? Who provides the oversight? Parents have a critical perspective, and we want to use, again, this global studies part of the presentation to show this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds.
Have a handout.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, so Mike Noonan, 4 Rosewood Place. Clock is ticking here, so I'm going to zero in on the Global Studies class that we discussed a couple of weeks ago. Amber, you and Daniel had presented on this and provided a description of the class. You had described it as a framework for developing opinions versus facts, helping students develop critical reading skills, helping them effectively compile information and develop annotation skills while reading, quote, nonfiction texts. As it turns out, we have an opportunity to kind of compare that description with what my kids encountered when they took global studies last year at Gibbons. My wife and I were so concerned, and by the way, we weren't the only parents who were concerned. We were so concerned that we met with the teacher, and we asked her to provide the reading materials. And what I just gave each of you is the sum total of what the teacher provided to us. There are 5 modules. There are 5 articles in each module. What I think we heard 2 weeks ago is that this class is not intended for indoctrination. It's not intended to focus on any one ism. I think that's what we heard 2 weeks ago. So I handed out, turns out that out of those 25 articles, 24 of them deal with racism. They deal with it in an extremely biased way. Some of the authors of those articles are folks like Ibram Kendi, who is controversial to say the least. I'm going to read a few of them. Africans, Slavery and Race, Slavery and the Idea of Race, Jefferson's Notes, which is an article that disparages Thomas Jefferson as a racist, Complicated Abe, which disparages Abraham Lincoln as being a racist. Home is where the hatred is, and the hidden costs of being African American, and I can go on. My kids described this class as being focused on mostly racism, also climate change with some classism thrown in. So the question becomes, again, first of all, what do we expect our kids to get out of a class like this, where the entire focus is on racism? It's ideological. There's really nothing else being talked about. The other thing I should mention is that the class covered the Emmett Till murder in 1955, but it brought in ideology again by using the book Ghost Boys. Ghost Boys is a book that has been banned in many jurisdictions. It's a book that's been called out by police associations because it says that the police are systemically racist. My wife and I were so concerned about this that we actually suggested to the teacher that Chip Dopolite, if I'm saying his name correctly, who was the school resource officer, come in and speak with the kids in global studies to assure them that the police are not bad people, because there was a concern about that. So first of all, how does this play out when we're educating 12 and 13-year-old kids? What do we expect them to learn when they're being infused with this biased perspective on racism? And you see it in the articles that the teacher sent out. And then the second question I have is, where does what I just described align with what was described 2 weeks about a course called Global Studies? This course is all history, it's all biased history, and it's very much focused on an ism, one particular ism, racism. And the
Your time
question
is
I would
up, sir.
ask again is why? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Paula Matthew, 20 Andrews. Again, we acknowledge the effort expended by Amber and Daniel in their presentation on October 4th. However, we as parents have our own perspective on what is happening in the schools, and is based on facts, what we're seeing and hearing from the children. While your broad brush painted a great sketch on paper, you and I know as educators that the teachers in the classroom can take that sketch and add their own color to it. As our walkthrough of the global studies material of last year illustrates, ideology is making its way into our schools. Critical race theory is the idea that racism is everywhere, that all white people are inherently privileged and racist, that people have internalized racism, and that everyone in power in all institutions are racist. Now, you might argue that what is being taught is racial identity and understanding, but that's not true. Those who push CRT also push, as related topics, white privilege and oppression. Journalist Chris Rufo stated that critical race theory is an academic discipline formulated in the 1990s built on the intellectual framework of identity-based Marxism. Relegated for many years to universities and obscure academic journals, over the past decade, it has increasingly become the default ideology in our public institutions. It has been injected into government agencies, public school systems, teacher training programs, and corporate human resource departments in the form of diversity training programs, human resource modules, public policy frameworks, and school curricula. We tell our students that every problem is the result of white men, and everything Western civilization built is racist. Capitalism is a tool of white supremacy. Those points are straight out of Kimberlin Crenshaw's main points verbatim in Critical Race Theory, the writing that formed the movement. As a human race, we are not perfect, and American history reflects our imperfections, but no one today is responsible for the past. Children should be taught to respect one another, human to human. Teaching white privilege teaches racial minorities to hate their white peers based on their race, and that is the definition of racism. Children need time to learn how to read, write, and play. It's not appropriate for the young to be learning how their white peers are racist simply because they're white. Westborough Public Schools does not teach a class entitled Critical Race Theory, but Westborough Public School is teaching its principles all the same. The Global Studies class we just discussed is one vivid example, but we and many other parents have real-life examples from classrooms throughout this district. If needed, we'll bring those examples forward in a future meeting. In the meantime, however, we remain...
Thank you, Ms. Matthews.
Never mind. Not important.
Everybody, man, you guys all want respect. Why don't you give it?
Okay, discussion of international trips.
Could we have a
Excuse me.
moment?
Excuse me.
Just take a moment. Take a moment. You're fine. Just take a moment.
Since we have heard many things in recent meetings, I would like to see if the administration would like to respond to any comments made tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would probably sort them a little bit and try to make sure that a couple that we follow up on. I appreciate the reflectiveness with which Susan and the group shared, acknowledging that we're trying to make sure that we're bringing forward information to them to respond to their comments, and I appreciate the tone and the way that they brought those forward a great deal. We will make a couple comments tonight on pieces we can pull out, and I think my sense is, and again, Daniel and I are getting a feeling for how to do this thoughtfully for you. I would probably follow up on Mr. Noonan's comments after Daniel and I have a chance to look at it and discuss it. I have a meeting with Jack tomorrow, which is nice, so I'd like an opportunity to have a follow-up on that, and we can bring that to the next discussion. And I would probably focus on Mr. Noonan's content that he shared, and we can tease out the overlap between Speaker Ford's comments and Mrs. Matthews' comments to make sure that we are clear about what's falling in curriculum and what isn't, so that people get that clarity. I just want to say, before I allow Daniel to comment, we continue to respect the time for citizens to comment. The democratic process test remains incredibly important. We're trying to raise and educate people that it's essential to the process of open citizenship, so I continue to welcome this opportunity and their comments. Our purpose in commenting isn't to create rebuttal. I think that's an important acknowledgement. Our purpose is to lift out specifics that we feel like might not be illustrating Westborough, so that people watching the show aren't, the show, I should call it the meeting, are not confused about what they hear that they think, is that the Westborough Public Schools or not? Like, we want to be clear what we own and what we don't, and we'll represent those things that we do with clarity to you. I was going to turn it over to Daniel, who wanted to make one or two specific comments, and then I'll finish up with a couple comments on that. We'll speak to the pieces that Mr. Noonan shared at our next meeting. Is that so? Daniel, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Can I speak briefly to the Global Studies course?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, we're making this up, so yes, you can. You go right ahead.
One thing, I understand that lifting out that course and the topics in there, you can highlight them and say that they have one specific perspective. And the course, though, to put it in context, is this mini course. It's not our core content of our curriculum. It's offered not even for the whole school year. It doesn't meet every day. Kids are engaged in debate and conversation. We think it's important for our students to read a balance of literature, and we are happy to review that course and take your critique of it and look at it with a new lens. But I would also urge you to look at our entire curriculum and not just pick one course that you decide is sort of characterizes the entire social studies department as being, deliverers of the critical race theory perspective. We certainly do not have our kids feel guilty about being white. We teach history, and it's, and we celebrate, and then, the aspects of our country that we're very proud of, and the moments in history that I think we all agree were moments that we wanted, we needed to rise up to be better, and our country has. And to not teach that to our students, I think, would be asking us to really not give them a clear picture of the world and that they've inherited, and the history of this country. But I agree with Amber that we can come back to this, and we will. So I appreciate your comments. And then I want to turn my attention for a moment to to Boyd's comments in that, he always addresses us as groomers, and, this is not talking about grooming animals, and we're talking about grooming kids in a sexual way. The definition of sexual grooming is that, we are building somehow a perverse relationship of trust and emotional connection with our children in order to exploit them sexually. That kind of characterization of the Westborough Public Schools is absurd. And I'm going to turn it over to Amber now. She, I think, has some comments about
Thank you.
Boyd's presentation,
No,
too.
I appreciate that. And I think that, and to echo Daniel's comments around our coursework, we have a wide array of experiences that our students have. We're always reviewing curriculum. We take good feedback, and I think we've been clear that we welcome that. And so we'll if we have other additional comments we can make after we look at that, and we can give feedback next week. But I appreciate Daniel's kind of curriculum depth to be able to add other pieces to the discussion now, so you don't have to wait 2 weeks to hear some comments back. I want to also acknowledge that our purpose is to ensure that people aren't confused with regard to comments around the Westborough Public Schools. Specifically, I want to be clear with Daniel and echo that our faculty are not groomers, and while it seems absurd to me to have to comment upon that, I feel for the public record and for the ownership of my faculty that are sitting here looking really shocked, that they understand that we are confident representing our faculty to the public. I think, as we've heard from Mr. Conklin's comments many times before, he is unpacking really broad social issues that he's concerned about. I respect that he's concerned about children in our society. That is a common mission that we share. These are very complex issues, and I think, because we deal with 4,000 students, don't own the luxury of slicing out those we want to, deal with and not, right? We own the public education of a wide array of amazing families. And so I think, we always encompass a very wide umbrella of love, care, education, and support. And I respect that they are here because they are concerned about children. I want to be clear, though, that the comments mentioned tonight, looked at social media, hospitals, and many generalizations about schools. I want to be clear tonight that related to his comments, those are not related to the Westborough Public Schools, and that the curriculum and experiences related to our health curriculum, our sexuality development at the high school in terms of health and well-being, look at self-care, look at body management. This curriculum and these issues that he's talking about are not prevalent within the structure of our schools. So I think specifically with his tonight, I just want to make sure anyone watching understands that, we acknowledge and respect the information that he wants to bring forward, and I think it's important we emphasize that that is not taking place in our schools. I think that with regard to the curriculum, Daniel's already commented, we will follow up, we have additional information later, but we do welcome this process. It is a public process, and you've decided that you want to make sure that we speak on public record about this in a way that represents us, and so tonight I feel like, we're moving forward with our second session of doing that. So thank you for the public comment. We look forward to continuing this dialogue if needed to make sure that people know that in the Westborough Public Schools, this is a Westborough community we're proud of. And I'm proud of all the people that live here, and I want very much for them to feel that they can and should be proud of the Westborough Public Schools, and so we will make sure that our opportunities echo that. So along that note, I think it would be also important to welcome two of our faculty tonight who are here tonight to transition us to talk about curriculum and some of the amazing experiences that we provide to our students. And they're going to talk about 2 trips that they would like to propose. So do you want to come up? You can. Yes, definitely. Do you want to do one trip and then one? Are you doing them together? No. Okay, why don't you go, Nikki, and then Jen, you can do it. Thank you.
You can actually sit here. You
Sit
don't
right
have to
there.
be
You can
all-
relax. You can
Sit
sit
down.
at the chair.
relax.
You can- Welcome, Nikki Miller, and she's going to share.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for having me. I am proposing a trip for April vacation of 2024 to Normandy, Brittany, and Paris, France. It's all in France, one country. We're not electing to do the London extension. And this would be a history trip, and we will be celebrating the 80th anniversary of D-Day in June, and so we thought 2024 would be a great time to visit Normandy just before that anniversary. So it's mainly a history trip. Obviously, there'll be a lot of culture, there'll be a lot of art, language, and food along the way, so I think it'll be
I
very...
love this new trip. Yeah, I mean, this
very
is a great
educational.
historical perspective trip, so thank you. Usually one of the things we do is we also do want to keep giving a few highlights about anything, and you can answer questions. How many days are you gone?
This will be a 9-day trip.
And how many people are you able to take? You know, just they're going to roll you through questions, so it's nice if you can give them, you know, how many students you're taking, your chaperone kind of balance. It's just good to give them a picture of how we run a trip really well.
So absolutely. So the maximum number would be 40 that you know Brian encourages us to take. My chaperones will be the history department. I'm very happy to say. Mr. O'Brien, who teaches World War II, will be one of them. Mr. Belbin, retired Mr. Belbin, the elder, will be coming. A long-time department chair and history teacher. And if we have enough, perhaps our principal will join us also as a former history teacher. So yeah, we can take up to 40. I did run a trip to Italy last year, and I had 33 students. So I don't know if we'll get 40, but we could take that many. And this will be mainly a history trip, so it will be chaperoned by history teachers and former history teachers. And the cost of the trip will be $3,800, and if the family sign up the night of my meeting, if it's approved, they would get $100 off for a total of $3,709 for the 9 days.
Great.
Again, we're going to those 3 locations in northern France, and we'd just be in the country of France. And we'd fly in and out of Paris. We're hoping to see a lot, do a lot. The itinerary is packed, and there's a few optional things as well.
Is the transportation, once you're there, by bus? Do you move around by bus?
Yes. Similar to Italy, it will be a bus, yes. Yep. And there may be some things within Paris where we get on a public transportation.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, for the most part, it's the bus, yeah.
I noticed that there's a fair amount of time being, an effort, I guess, to explore the Normandy monuments and a discussion of what actually took place during the invasion of Europe. And I think that is a very good perspective for the kids. I don't know whether you're going to visit a cemetery.
Absolutely.
But I think that's super important for the kids to understand what it all means. So that's good.
And we will visit the cemetery, the American cemetery, yes, we will. Yes, it's on the itinerary.
It's a great
Thank
trip.
you. Yeah.
Question.
Of course.
It looks like a great trip. Just, I didn't hear when you were talking about the price. What is the cost per student?
Oh, it is
3,700. If they sign up
3,700.
that night, or 3,800 if they don't.
Right, 3,800.
Well, because after the last presentation about the trip to Australia, I got some questions from the residents about the cost to the school. So what is the total cost to the school budget for a trip like this? It's not.
Usually it's nothing.
No, it's covered. It's covered by the cost of the student who opts to go.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's no school budget impact.
Thank you. Yeah, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you. Yeah, it looks like a great trip.
I'll cover that one for you, Nikki. I got you.
Ally, any comments?
I think
I
Helen
wanna
wants to
go.
go.
Graduate serves as a.
Steve?
No.
She'll report back afterwards too, so.
So a couple things. One was, I imagine you guys are going to be monitoring between now and then the bed bug situation in France
Absolutely.
to make sure that that is under control by the time that our trip rolls around. Have you guys put any thought into doing travel in between the cities via train? I imagine that would probably hike up the price potentially, but it's also a really great experience for the kids because the public transport and the trains over there are just something that is not available here for kids. They have a wonderful train system over there, so I thought maybe, I don't know if that's something that you're
I
thinking
will ask the
about.
tour director. That's a great question, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely cuts the time too, so, for travel. But otherwise, it sounds great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anybody else?
No, but I can make a motion.
Please do.
Oh, question, go.
Quick question, I forgot to ask. Sorry. Last time I asked the same question. Are we looking at any options to help lower income families to afford a trip like this?
So,
Maybe not for this, but in the future.
yes, and
That's a definite, I mean, it's in our strategic plan. It's a district initiative piece, and I think Brian is already developing a plan with me for ways that we can begin to defer some costs. So, yeah, I think I can give you a report on that as part of our school year update, maybe in the spring, around ways that we see, establishing kind of an equity balance account for students who need a sliding scale support.
Great, thank you.
I have another question. Is this the same company that the other tours are using as well? Is it everyone goes through the same tour company?
All EF, yeah.
So my understanding is that Sue Smith has chosen also to work with EF. And Jeannie will speak about her carrier, which I believe is different.
Yep.
Yes.
All right,
Yeah,
good.
okay. So, yeah.
Right, because I would imagine that if the schools are using the same tour company for all the trips, then there would be some, ability for negotiation, et cetera, in the pricing if we're utilizing them for everything.
That would seem logical, but they don't do it. But I love the idea.
They're a genuine.
I've tried. I've tried that angle.
They're a very, very big
She
organization.
tries, Nikki tries, definitely.
Any other questions? All
Thank
right,
you.
well, I would like to make a motion to approve the trip to Normandy, France, April 13th through 20th. So that would be during April vacation in 2024.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Very good. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Right, Nikki,
0-0.
going to Normandy. That's gonna be a great trip. It's a great group of chaperones as well, so it should be really, because they also get all this conversation with the teachers in depth during that time, which is really another dimension of the trip, and it's really unique. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Jeannie, I don't think they've had a chance to meet you, so just make sure you introduce yourself and tell them what you do for us.
Sure. Hello, good evening. My name is Jeannie LaPlatney. I teach Spanish. I think this is my 6th year at Westborough. I had Hallie in class. I had Brooke in class. I usually teach juniors, mostly juniors. And I'm proposing that I did a trip last year to Costa Rica. I didn't come in here because it was during COVID, and you guys just did the conversation separately. That trip was great. It was amazing. It was an immersion trip. So we have had conversations with Brian about the trips kind of being more discipline focused. So the idea being that world languages every odd year, take students, and then history and English go other years, so that the trips can be kind of focused on the discipline that the teachers are teaching. So, Nikki's a history teacher, so she's trying to do a history trip, and I want to do a language trip because I want my students to have the chance to use Spanish in an immersion environment in Spain, in this case. And they did that in Costa Rica, and they were just so proud of themselves, and they were speaking and asking for things and understanding things that were going on, and it was very exciting for them. We had a great visit there. And I did a lot of research about trips and options, and I've been to Spain many times. I lived there, and I've taken students on similar trips. So I'm doing kind of Spain's greatest hits, except more of the south. Greatest hits south of Madrid. So these are kind of the places you really can't miss. And so this is why I chose this particular trip and this provider. I was also interested in trying a different provider because while EF is really great with the education side, I was a little disappointed for the value the students got for the money in terms of hotels. I thought it was fine in terms of travel. The tour guide was amazing, but I felt a little bit nickeled and dimed, and we've kind of put in some feedback with them on that. So I wanted to try a different group, and there's lots of professional groups on Facebook, so I went with Explorica this time. And they are a subset of World Strides, and World Strides is also very well respected. So yes, the greatest hits being Barcelona. Madrid, we are going to Madrid. Madrid to me always feels kind of like any other big city. So we're going to Toledo and also then to the south. So when people think of Spain, they think of Andalusia. So Sevilla, Cádiz, Malaga, and Granada. Granada is like the Moorish palace. They have the Alhambra. And that's like kind of the most amazing thing that they're gonna see. I'm very excited for them to see it. So this is a 10-day trip also. This is an immersion trip, so I'm bringing another Spanish teacher. Kate Shaw has been, I think this is her 3rd year now. And the idea being that we can supplement a little bit when we do tours in Spanish, that we can help the students a little bit who are on the weaker side, and then the idea being that the students who are on the stronger side can just work more with the guides. And I'm looking for about 13 minimum, so it would be a small trip. Like I don't need to bring a huge group here, just like the students who are interested in this kind of experience, and then capping at about 20. I think it has to be capped at 20 based on the transportation. We will be taking a train. So the AVE train goes from Madrid down to Sevilla, and it is an 8-hour car ride, and it's a 3-hour speedy train ride. So I'm excited for them to see that. So that's kind of the details that you were asking about. A couple things that are different than what you have here is that on day 5 in Madrid, we were gonna do a bus tour of the greatest, like the big, Madrid monuments, and they are cool. It's very interesting to see them. It's a different kind of architecture. But it's not as interesting, I thought, as going to Toledo. So we're going to do Toledo, which is, if you ever see El Greco paintings, it's like those sharp hills in Spain. And also we're going to do a cooking class. So they're going to have a tapas dinner, and we're going to do the cooking class beforehand.
That'll be fun.
Awesome. So I thought that they'd be really excited about that. So what questions do you, and the cost actually is $4,200, because I added the Toledo trip and took out that bus trip around Madrid. And then the adult cost is not, we're not bringing adults, we're not offering it to adults except our students. And then they can save the $200. This says 10/26, but they moved that back for me until the 22nd of November. So, yeah.
Great.
So I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
If you had to summarize the theme that you would like the kids...
Oh, it's language immersion.
It's just specifically using Spanish in
so-
a day-to-day circumstance.
Yeah, you can think of some of the things that we teach at Westborough as being in 2 categories of content and skills. So we have content, we're traveling in Spain for sure. Art and architecture is probably among the themes, but we're really focused more on skill and communication skills on this trip.
That's good. The other, which I didn't mention to both, is that historically we've asked for, if you will, a student report when you guys come back in terms of what their experience was.
That you want to have students come in. Yes.
Rosendo's programs, which seem to be primarily Spanish-speaking areas that he visits, not all, but many. And the story that he gives you at the end, which is a summary of Mark Twain, which basically says, because you travel, it eliminates a whole bunch of things that in fact are problems with our society. And,
This is very true.
I think historically, the school committee here has sponsored these for just that reason, because there's a lot of things to learn when you see how the other guy lives.
It's very
Both
true.
good and bad, and certainly the trips to South America, I think, have taught the kids an awful lot of stuff about how the rest of the world lives. So,
They comment those. They say those things. Yeah, you're right.
yeah. So, sorry I took the first questions, but go ahead.
Some questions?
Sure.
I'm very jealous. It looks like a great trip. I mean, Spain, as you know, has so much history of different cultures, ethnicities, time periods. It's a mishmash. And I think it's a fascinating trip. I was just trying to see on this little map in the brochure. It points to, I'll probably butcher the names, Ceuta. It's that little town on the African continent that still belongs to Spain. Are you planning to go there as well, or no? Is that
It
part
would
of the
be
trip?
exciting to do that. But usually we're limited to these 10-day windows. And so it might have to be another trip that does that. I think it's really important. We have our French teachers. I would be wonderful if they took people to different places in Africa. But the cool thing, we were talking about the different cultures in Spain. In Andalusia, that's the big thing. We had 3 cultures living in harmony, and you see the Arabic culture, you see the Spanish culture, you see the Jewish culture, and how they all live together. And all these monuments show them too. So they're going to be learning all about that. So it's really important. And then that's a culture that's kind of South Spain, Northern Africa, right? Yeah.
Long time, yes. And I'm surprised it didn't include Gibraltar. It's right there.
They don't speak Spanish in Gibraltar.
They do speak English, though, but you're right. That was-
It'd be immersion in monkeys in English. You have to leave something out, and these are the. Actually, what am I
Spain,
saying?
France,
You have to leave lots
Italy.
out. I mean, it'd be amazing to go to Bilbao and other places like where I lived in Valencia, and yes, that would be they would like that, I'm sure, but. It'll have to be on a different trip.
It's not a 28-day trip. They just have April break.
What other questions do you have?
Comment on what Jakub was saying. When I did this trip, I think what they had traded out was we did Tangier instead of doing Barcelona. So we had just gone to Madrid, gone south, and then they took a ferry, did a day trip to Tangier and came back, which was also, I mean,
Very
a
cool trip,
really
too.
very cool experience to be able to go and say you went to Africa for the day.
And
Like
did
we
you
go
do
to
that
New
with
Hampshire.
Did you do that with Westborough High School?
Yeah.
I did
Oh,
that
that's
at
neat.
Westborough.
That's cool. Who took you?
Oh,
We're
wow.
not that old.
Miss Pisha, I think?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Nice.
Sí, tengo una pregunta.
Excelente, señor. Adelante.
¿Es para el viaje es para todos
Buena
niveles de
pregunta.
español?
Buena pregunta.
Is it for every level of
Actually,
Spanish?
this is a smaller trip, so the idea is that we're going to start. Students have the options to go on history, English, and science and math trips. So the idea is that we're having our students that can really speak Spanish go on this trip. So it's going to be at least sophomores and higher, and including students who aren't in Spanish class but actually speak Spanish too.
Oh, okay.
So anybody that actually has an intermediate or higher level of Spanish can go. Yeah. Excelente español.
Gracias.
Enhorabuena.
Viví en México.
Bien, me encanta México.
We need subtitles.
I lived in Mexico.
And I said, I love Mexico.
Anybody else? Is there a motion?
Sure, I can.
Go ahead.
I make a motion that we approve the trip to Spain during April vacation in the year 2025.
I second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I really
Can't wait.
like the direction of, thank
Oh,
you so
Jeannie.
much, you guys, for coming. Thank you.
I think you left your phone, or somebody left their phone.
I'm very, very pleased with the kind of the reorganization of the structure of what Brian wants to do with the high school trips. I think it'll shift the types of things that they're seeing and open up students who might not have thought to travel within their world language class, but it gives them different avenues of interest. And, I think, thank you. Thank you, you
Thank
guys.
you.
Following up, like our history, we turn out a lot of history majors and people that are really passionate about civics and history. And so adding a trip like that, those types of things really, so he's diversifying it really nicely. So it'll be nice to hear Becca report on those, on those trips and then continue to look at like how that work kind of creates a continuum for students. So thank you.
Very good. Well, the next item on the agenda is the final reading and approval of policy updates for tiered review, DESI and DESI changes. I don't know how to handle this one because the text and volume of this information is quite voluminous, and so
Well, I think to help you.
I'll give the context.
Let's turn it over to Daniel and he can,
So just for context, the state has this process that called tiered focus monitoring, where they come in and basically work with the school districts to make sure that they're compliant with state laws and regulations having to do with a wide variety of issues, from special education to protecting special, different classes of students, our bullying policies, and any policies having to do with the health and safety of our students. And one of the things that the state recently passed, the legislature passed some new language about suspension laws, suspension and expulsion, and making sure that the students are not spending inordinate amounts of time outside of school being just sort of shunted. It's not a problem in our community, but I understand the rationale for wanting to make sure that there was due process when it came to discipline. So with any state law comes new guidelines. The guidelines are fairly complex, and we worked with our legal counsel to be in compliance with the new law. And so we will eventually put a hyperlink to it, but at this point it's spelled out in the documents, and it's a mirror image in each of the handbooks of what is our process for discipline when it comes to these more involved cases. And so it basically the language was developed by legal counsel. It matches what the state wants to see during their tiered focuses monitoring process. It's somewhere between a policy and a regulation. So basically you vote on the handbooks, and because they're coming in the middle of the year in November to review our various policies and procedures, we wanted the handbooks to be, you have a chance to look at it, to see that our lawyer looked at it, to just then, amend your vote. Usually it's in June for the beginning of next year that you're approving handbooks. But this year, because we're in the tiered focus monitoring, you now have the handbooks before you for a mid-year correction, if you will. And the other piece that's here is this one policy that is a co-curricular and extracurricular activities policy. This is a policy that already exists, and there's one, what they call a protected class, that the language when it comes to the civil rights of different groups of students just needed to be amended here. And so the whole policy is the same. I'm surprised I don't see the red line in here.
Roll down.
I don't.
It's in their PDF because the
Maybe the way
PDF
it's
carries over the red line.
Yeah. So, I mean, the only thing that's added, I can tell you, is it's it has to do with racial and ethnic groups and gender. We don't discriminate by any of and students who are homeless. And so those are the protected classes that were not in our policy that they want to see, the state wants to see added.
And I think to echo that, our target goal is to make sure that we always, and this is what they basically use, a stick and a carrot. They come and use their tiered monitoring to make sure you're pulling all the policy language into the right places. We're going to be required to add it because they're going to, if we don't put it in ourselves and manage it, they'll give us a tiered monitoring finding, and then we have to track it for several years, and it becomes hugely cumbersome. My motivation is we resolve anything we need to make sure that our tiered monitoring assessment by the state is clean, and basically they use their visit to force you to kind of update all your stuff. They're very helpful. They basically go in and they cull through all your stuff, and they basically say, add one word here, add this here. You need the more extensive policy, in your handbook. We'll do it as a link so it doesn't completely overwhelm our handbook, as Daniel said. And so the target is to have you vote the updated approval of the state language, which our lawyers, as Daniel said, have seen and feel is in compliance with what we need to do so that we can make sure that our handbooks will check the box and be in a very good place when they come for their review in November.
I have a question. So I understand that you have the language there for the JJE, co-curricular activities. I assume that's what you're going to be okay, that's the proposed change. But with respect to the suspension modifications that have been made, is there a way to point to where exactly it's been made in each of those handbooks? Or maybe I'm...
It's like a 12, it's a giant.
Yeah, there's a section of the handbooks that's should be in redlined, and it may be it's a relatively long section. It's about 10 or 12 pages of new text that's in there.
I see. Okay.
That's all
You
red.
see it?
Yeah, I see.
And it again, it's they're not giving us much wiggle room in terms of what they want to see there, and it's the spirit of it makes a lot of sense. Is that we're only suspending in a certain appropriate cases, and if discipline, we should try to discipline by keeping kids in school rather than having them spend time out, getting alienated and feeling, not a part of the community. And so the language in there has to do with due process and having an appropriate sort of like escalation, if you will, in terms of when it is you will suspend students, under what conditions.
And then Daniel checked on whether or not it makes sense that we do that as like an appendix with a link, so that it doesn't kind of create this overwhelming density around discipline. It's not a gigantic culture of, our daily experience. Most people are trying to look up what the dress code is, So, I mean, again, there's the policy on different pieces. So to be in compliance, we'll add the language and then keep it, placed in a way that's both available and clear, but that it doesn't define the cultural norms of what people look at when they open up the school handbook as they're getting ready to start their school year.
And then you said legal counsel has already looked at it and...
Yeah.
Yeah, legal counsel wrote it for us. We took a first pass at it. The state they're very prescriptive when it comes to this particular policy and in terms of how they want to see us implement it. And so legal counsel that's working with a number of school districts knows exactly what the state's looking for and helped us. We don't usually have to do that, but for this particular section, we did.
So I believe we received them at the last meeting as a first reading. I believe you could vote them as a block to update them within compliance to DESE standards having been reviewed by our legal counsel, and then they would become part of the complete handbook before the review arrives.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the changes noted in this discussion in policy JJ-E, co-curricular and extracurricular activities, and the application of those changes to the various handbooks in the school system. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please.
Thank you. I just want to commend Daniel and Sherry again. The amount of work it takes to be within all the legal compliance with DESI is very cumbersome. And if you get, into a cycle with them where they mark you for tiered monitoring, you really don't want to be in that cycle. So this is the way we make sure that we're in good shape. And I think overall, in my time here, every review we've had has been highly, successful and in good shape. Thank you for that vote. Okay.
Budget presentation. The budget presentation is next.
So yes, we're steaming along here. So welcome to budget season. This is your official starting #1 presentation. And over the years, I finally learned, it took me like year 6 before I was like, I need to number these. Because then later I try to go back to them and I can't. So now it's it's very generic. #1, enrollment and assessment. And so this begins the annual report by which the start of budget season is. Daniel's going to take it from here and he's going to walk you through the enrollment update. And it just becomes a benchmark for us as we begin looking at staffing. Our core philosophy is going to be around maintaining class size and looking to core program work. And so he's going to step you through all of this, and it just becomes part of the general discussion that we use as a counterbalance to any other requests, so you can make good decisions as we move into budgeting. By budget presentation 3, you are going to see all of the requests from faculty leadership, and they might well have requests for additional positions, and those end up getting weighed against kind of this presentation and then what they're trying to achieve with those additions. So I'll turn it over to Daniel.
Okay. We start with enrollment because it helps you get a sense of what class size is, what we anticipate it's going to look like, and whether there are any particular areas that sort of stand out where we might have a budget request for in terms of personnel. So there's this enrollment trends chart that we have that looks at year over year, just so you get a picture of how our enrollment has been changing over the last few years. There was that large drop during the COVID period, and then we picked up 31 students in the 21-22 school year, 21-22, yeah, and then we went down by 20 the following year. So there's a little up down going on, and then this year we're up by 65 students compared to last fall. And what I want to make sure that you understand is when we say we're up by 65 students, it's not like we've been static and 65 students came in. I was looking at the data today. I put you on the spot and ask you to guess, but I don't want to embarrass anyone. How many students between one October and another October actually go in and out? I was actually, frankly, a little surprised. The number's 500, about 500 students. So 500 in, 500 out, and at the end of that, it's like basically the 65 is actually 565 in, 500 out. I'm rounding numbers just so you get the picture. So it's not, it's, and the reason I bring that up is because when we look at this, a couple of things. I'm going to point out where the growth the unanticipated growth is, and then I'm also going to talk a little bit about our English language learner population. So we predict at this point, like without fully knowing what it's going to look like next year, and so the 65 students are students that we didn't know to budget for this year, and and where they landed is basically pointed out in this table here. So what you have is what our predictions were at this time last year and what the actual numbers are now at each of the schools. And as you can see, the 65 over on the far right, and then we have basically, it's sort of even among the K-3 schools, 10, 13, and 9. WEC is up by 4. Mill Pond, it's a much bigger school. It rolls up. In fact, it sort of goes with the pattern. If you think about Fales, Hastings, and Armstrong all go into Mill Pond. The Mill Pond population has went up by almost 30. That's like the average of, the K-3. So it's kind of spread out evenly in that sense. And then Gibbons got 14 kids, and the high school's down 13. By historic standards, the high school's at a relatively high mark in terms of being close to 1,200 kids, where we generally have been historically closer to 1,100 at the high school. So you have to keep in context, like I'm just talking year to year in terms of what our predictions were. So these are not big numbers necessarily at any one school, but 65 kids is 65, more bodies that we do need to pay for, the education of. As far as English language learners, I do want to point out here, this number is a much larger increase than we had anticipated, even than the 65. So again, thinking back to the 500 in, 500 out, it ends up that we had, of the ones that came in, a much higher proportion are English language learner students. And that does have budget implications that we'll get into at some point, because it's a limited number of staff, and you have, we have an intensive program. You need to have that in order for those students to be able to, learn English effectively. When they come in and they don't speak what we call level 1 students, they have almost no English skills. There's an intensive sort of onboarding, process in terms of helping them come up to speed and getting basic English skills so that they can navigate through the schools. But so level 1s and level 2s require a substantial amount of staff and effort. So having 75 more students and having the 17 at the high school, I want to point out, that increases, about 3 years ago, I would say the high school was around 20 or 30 students. Now we're up to about 66. And when students come in and they don't speak English when they're in a high school setting, it's a whole different ballgame than when they come in kindergarten, or, because you're learning language, you're so, it's like a sponge, and what you're learning is not so academic at that point, right? But when you get to high school and there's biology and history and these more complex subjects and words that you're learning, the catching up and getting the students to go from that level 1 to level 5 to get them out of the English language learner program is more complicated. Now I'm going to go into just class size in general and just remind you that we have these guidelines. So it's, we like to keep our classes obviously at a reasonable level so that our students get a very high quality education, and always the younger grades where the kids are a little, it's harder to capture the attention and corral young bodies and minds. So we, that's always where the class size is going to be smaller, and then as they get older, we can have more students, and so the teacher to student ratio can be a little higher. So let's see. Sorry, I'm just looking at, oh yeah. So this slide here, before I get into showing you class size across schools, the average class size, I just want to give you a picture of what we anticipate if, let's say, it's even next year, 500 in, 500 out. What happens is, the third grade class graduates up to Mill Pond. Mill Pond's 6th grade class goes up to Gibbons. Gibbons' 8th grade class goes to the high school. We know the size of those classes, and they run between 260 students to 300. That's a big differential. So sometimes you will have a class that's particularly large leaving Mill Pond, for example, like that negative 38 is you either have a large class leaving or a small class coming in, or some mix there that's going on. But basically, this gives you a sense of we're not expecting big changes. Mill Pond going down by 38 is the most sort of, that one sticks out a little bit. We've been up at 900 students at Mill Pond in the past, so going down to 847 is on the lower side for us. You see the high school bumping up to over 1,200. They have there's a few classes with 300 that are in the pipeline between Gibbons. I think we have a couple at Mill Pond and the high school. In any case, so that gives you a picture of sort of how we are sort of looking at the schools, and then we take these numbers, we basically step everyone up, and then we look at the teaching staff and then come up with these averages that I'm showing you now of what we anticipate to be our class size. Given current staffing at our K-3 schools.
Time to go home.
There we go, yeah. I should make this more interactive, maybe.
That's more exciting.
So given our current staff and what we expect, again, not having a crystal ball, assuming we're sort of static in terms of numbers between this year and next year, we are in very good shape in terms of that, meeting our target levels, where if you look at our kindergarten classes, it's sort of between 16 to 19 students, depending on the school. First grade is between 17 to 19 students. Second grade between 17, 18 students, and third grade 22 students in that one grade at Armstrong. It's possible, I haven't looked at this carefully enough, it's possible, depending on how many sections at Armstrong are with that first grade, sometimes there'll be 6 teachers that'll be at a grade level, and we'll see that if we took one of those 6 teachers and move that teacher to third grade.
You can bring that. That's what he did this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'll look at that between now and, one of later budget discussion, but it's possible that the third grade number at Armstrong could be brought down to 19, and the first grade number
This just gives you the raw data with us
wouldn't
doing
go up
nothing.
by that
Right.
much. But I
Right.
mean, the general picture is a good one in terms of class size. This is then looking at Mill Pond and Gibbons, again, within the range of your target range for class sizes.
Well, and if the numbers held true and again, it's conceptual because we did the exact thing last year when we gave it to you and we were off by 65. We grew more than that. And so if we did an exact roll in, roll out and bring all the grades up, like Daniel just said, we'd go down by 33. And he'll certainly give you his conclusions. But if that held true, I'd be actually happy about that because I think Mill Pond was running a little high in their sections, right? So they were on the higher end of their class sections. And so when you see if that grade level did actually go down, these numbers look great. I don't know that they'll hold. And the 6th grade's running a little high. So, it's all stuff we have to figure out with sectioning.
I mean, I'm going to show you the high school now, and this one's always complicated. Just to refresh your memory, once you get to the high school and you're getting to electives and leveling and classes that have to be, it's okay. And sectioning gets complicated because you're intersecting with band and chorus and other specials. And so to even things out, the way you can do that, basically you can just spread them out evenly when you're in Mill Pond and the K-3 schools and not have to worry about, as you go through the day, the interference of other electives and specials. So at the high school, we have this is this year's numbers, and because the high school has large enrollment, and we knew this last year, we signaled it to you, and we added some FTEs in terms of faculty there. And even with adding that, we have some sections that are higher than we would have liked to have, and by historic standards, we don't usually have, we have been able to keep our sections between 10 and 24 students. And out of the 534 sections, I'm trying to remember or figure out what, Brian put these numbers in. I'm not sure what the 514 versus 534, but there's about 534 sections. He's saying 19 of those, the second to last row, 19 have 26 students or more, or 26 students. He's saying, what do you, do you have some insight to
No, I
what
was
the
just going to
third?
say that, so 2022 to 2023 is what he's referring to in the parentheses, right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
what
in
it says
23,
above.
24, right, so 22, I see.
So 19
Got it.
now, last year.
Got it, got it, got it, got it. Thank you. Brian's probably thinking, he sometimes watches these meetings. He's probably embarrassed on my behalf that I don't understand his chart. So I'm sorry, Brian.
We understand it, Mr. Callahan.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
I'm just tired, Brian. So what you can see is like, there's only a couple of classes that are at the 27, 28 range. We really don't like having classes that large. Even the 26 and the 25 are not ones we like to have, by historic standards. We try to keep it more in the, 24-ish range at the top, but this year we had more than the typical number. You can see that number like with 25 students at 28 sections, going up from 9 the prior year. So there's 28 different sections that have, 28 that have 25 students in them.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What are the guidelines for the high school classroom size? Because they're not included in the previous.
I don't think we have school committee guidelines on that.
That's because of the electives. In other words, we have to have a minimum in a class. But once you've met the minimum, we're going to have that class, whether there's 12 more or 6 more. So the issue, I think, is those normally larger classes that everybody has to go to is where the size issues might be applied. But on the other hand is that I think one of the primary goals in high school is teach students how to study. And so whether they're in a big room or a small room, you don't have that choice, of course, when you go to college. So I think my first class had about 400 in it, which was you do what you got to do and you do the best you can, So.
I'm going back to this slide just to refresh your memory that we're anticipating the high school is going to go up by 16 next year. So they're not going down, they're not going up by a large number, but they're, when you look at Brian's sectioning for this year, he has not rolled these up because it's hard to do. You cannot and this is when we get into the budgeting discussion about personnel and whether we would add personnel, always what the discussion is for the high school is we will say something to the effect that we need like a 2.0 FTE, and then we will divide that by department where we might add, of that 2.0, it might be that we have 0.6 in the world language departments and like a 1.2 in the science department. The enrollment numbers become clear to us for the following year only in spring after the students do their class selection in the springtime. So then we would hire based on, if we came to you with a request and we needed 2 additional FTEs, you would be giving us permission to, after the course selection has happened, to make a decision about how to divide up the FTEs. Hope that makes sense. So let's see. So let me just summarize, and then you can ask me some more questions here. We have 65 more students than we anticipated who are not budgeted. We also are assuming that our class size is going to be in very good shape for next year. And I've already highlighted for you that we're concerned about some of the sectioning at the high school. And I do want to emphasize, and this is an issue that we're struggling with now, we may need to do something to try to help our district out. I mean, we have unanticipated enrollment of students that have very intense needs when it comes to English language learning, especially at the high school, and they are struggling. That department is sort of busting at the seams, and in an ideal world, we would do something to help, but at a minimum, I'm just foreshadowing that those are hot spots for next year's budget. So that's my enrollment overview. You missed some of it, Amber. You missed the highlights.
I missed
mean,
all sorts of things, I'm sure, but
you
you and
okay
I
there?
have been through it.
Poor you. Yeah.
So I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
So the growth, I guess, so the total growth that we had was 65 students, but then we have 75 English language learner students that have increased. So well, two questions. One is, what are our thoughts in terms of who those students are? We understand that there's been a lot of new placement into the town. Are these potentially transient students? Are they students that are going to be staying? Are they in town? Are they not staying? Or do we know what's happening?
sure,
How are we
those-
anticipating what next year is going to look like?
Yeah, those are great questions. Since I deserted Daniel while I was coughing, I'll cover one of his questions. Yeah, when you think about it, you see that movement of 500 students moving out and 500 coming in, and, we gained some additional Ls. Some are newcomer families. I would anticipate, though, that even if those transition, that there would be new ones that would arrive. As we look towards potentially, and we've tracked this, the addition of the shelter that will open, that will house 20 families, I think you'll see kind of a stable base of families that will be with us. Not all of those will be L students, obviously, but in some cases, perhaps. So, I think it's hard to say, like, where, what's the balance of need in that population. Right now, some of those intensive language-based needs students are newcomers that came with no language and some aspects of fragmented schooling, so it makes them kind of doubly complex. I think in general, the staffing we have for our L faculty have met our needs for quite a while with some nice flexibility. And, Letitia does a great job as the department head to the director to kind of move her staffing around across the district. If a school goes up, another one goes down, she shifts that staffing. It's worked really well for us. But I think what Daniel's saying is we'll need to look at the overall bulk, and if we need to add staff, we're at least beginning to have that conversation.
So along those lines, are we then to sort of assume that a lot of these new placements are, so we're getting a lot of older children coming in that are high school age students?
Well, you can see in Daniel's data, you picked up more this year, and again, it's hard to know. That's what makes tracking enrollment kind of both fascinating, interesting, and complex, right? We didn't know you never know when a family moves in, what kids they're bringing with them. And so this year, yeah, you can see, Mill Pond picked up a bunch too, but 17 at the high school is a lot for them historically. Like Daniel said, they had 20 for they had a low number for many, many years, and then in the last 3, they've kind of grown. It's exciting. We have lovely students, and we want to make sure that they can achieve to the heights of their aspirations and their capacities. And so by giving them language skill, they take off. And so you can already see that, all of our new families, they have, plugged into the school district and are, starting to really participate.
Well, one of the things that clearly is, particularly now with changing trends in terms of the drivers where the students will come from, it's unknown really what's going to happen in terms of the overall performance of the Commonwealth in regards to immigrants and where they come from. But not only will that be Russian roulette, if you will, but the skill sets of the new students that show up is also another issue that has to be dealt with in terms of not only how many staff we have, but the qualifications of the staff to deal with who the new students are. So, I guess to the extent that this information is going to be the basis for which we budget, but in my own mind, who really knows what we're going to see in the next year or two? So,
Right, we do.
We got to do it this way, but
Right.
until you actually see the students in the system, the true budget impact won't be known.
Yes, I have a couple questions. In, looking at the summary, I'm trying to understand from the budget perspective. So, what is the biggest driver here for the budget? Is it the number of ELLs? Is that one of the biggest numbers? Driving a change of the budget.
Well, we haven't seen the budget yet.
So I understand, but that is a budget present. I mean, in the context of the budget presentation.
Yes, yes,
right?
yes,
So
yes.
I'm
I
looking
mean,
at the driver.
yes, of course. I mean, I'm teasing.
One of the things, Amber, when you were out, we did highlight for the sectioning at the high school and how, we have more sections with 25 or more students this year than we've had historically. And so I add that in addition to the ELL pieces, the high school is at historically high levels and it's not going down next year. It's going to go up by about 16 students. So, we spent some time looking at the sectioning there. So
to
those
your
were sort of the
point,
two
right.
things I was highlighting.
Right, and we start with enrollment because enrollment is the families and the students we serve, and staffing is the balance. Impact and staffing is the most important and expensive. So, yes, it is, enrollment is the biggest budget driver always. One of the benefits for us is in the last 3 years, our staffing hasn't grown because our enrollment kind of was working within this stabilization after about 5 years of incredible growth. So when we were growing at the elementary level, the staffing was very clean. Like you could see the 100, you divide them out by the class size and you drop in, we need 3 new teachers because of these numbers. It's more complex, as Daniel said, at the high school because for a while you can absorb when you're sectioning and then suddenly you might be like, when we have a number of kids who want to get AP history, like we've really worked not to say, sorry, you 25 kids, you can't have it because we can only enroll this many. We've created a new section and then in many cases move staffing around and that works for a while. And then you reach a place where you have to add a 0.5 or add a 1.0. So, you kind of run it for a while, but when they're sectioning at the high school, it is complex in the sense that our benchmark has been we want students to have the coursework they want. And so over my time here and Daniel's time, we've had discussions where, we'll get a call in July or June and they're trying to section and we had it happen to chemistry a couple years ago, one of the sections. And so, we made the decision to budget an extra section and make cuts elsewhere, knowing that we needed to do that. So, it's a kind of a dynamic process.
Okay, thank you. 2 more questions about the ELLs. How well are we doing teaching ELLs English? Like how many years students are in ELL program before they graduate and they no longer need that support? I know that there's a term for that, FEL or
Formerly English language learners, FELs, we call them.
You have an incredibly dynamic L team in this district and teachers that are serving our students. I think they have a very high success rate of moving students through programs successfully so that they can fly and be able to access classes with independence and academic success. And Letitia will do a report for you, probably middle of the year to mid-year, and she can share that data. And she'll provide for you kind of what are the percentages for how long it takes before students kind of flip out and move into independence with their language. We also have a high graduation rate, high performance rate. And again, like the thing about L students is that you have kids that are coming in with high intellect and high performance goals, right? Who need to access the language as quickly as possible so they can get into their core content. You have other students who have fragmentation in their schooling. So L's can't be characterized into a group, so it's not, people want to generalize people into clusters there. Those students are all really individual, and it's just the only thing that holds them together is we got to teach them English as fast as possible, right? And I think the team does a beautiful job.
Yeah, and I would say like if we had to give an average, it's 5 years, but that's kind of bimodal because like the young ones like will fly quickly. And it might be, 2-3 years, and then the older ones, like, we need the 5 years.
Right, and you might have an L that comes in at the high school who has, two other languages, but they're not English, so they need to learn a third. So you're talking about kids who are highly adept and capable of, all sorts of skills moving quickly. And so those students will come in, they'll absorb it quickly and jettison out. So it's definitely on a bell curve.
Yeah, I mean, definitely easier to learn languages when you're younger. I know that.
Yeah, yeah.
Last question. Out of the 75 new ELLs, do you have any, do you remember how many of them require additional services in addition to just English support?
Oh, we don't have that data tonight,
I
but we
don't
can
have
get
that
it.
data right
Yeah.
now, but we can get it, yeah.
Yeah, we can get that for you.
That's a good question.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
What is it typically, if we're looking at this being in the high school or elsewhere in the district, what is the typical student to teacher ratio for L students in that particular, in the English language learning class, for example?
So it's complicated to answer because the kiddos that are level 1s and level 2s need to be usually pulled out of the class to give separate instruction because they can't even access the instruction. They don't have enough English. So they require like small group instruction outside of the mainstream.
Like 40 minutes a day, yeah.
It's
like it's a
is it
lot.
40? It's
I
like,
think
yeah.
it's like a high
So
number.
the ratio for those groups can be, very like a 10-to-1 or something like that during that block. They're not out of the classroom, like Amber's saying, they're out for like 40 minutes every day to get that kind of 10-to-1 ratio, even smaller sometimes. But then the ELL teachers will be pushing in for the students who are 3s and 4s, and so they don't need to be given that kind of small intensive separate instruction, but they're in there with a regular general education teacher co-teaching a classroom. So I mean our ratio of one, if you just do a crude number of staff to L students, it's like a 21 to 1 ratio. But that, again, like gets, is very difficult to parse it out because, they spend their time in different ways during the day.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what we would be looking at in terms of, 75 students is a lot of students. So I would imagine you're probably, even if you were to absorb a certain percentage of that, you're still going to probably need additional staffing. So I'm trying to wrap my brain around what, I mean, the number you're telling me that I'm thinking about 3, but then better in terms of what's going to be absorbed within the existing classrooms and what the skill set is and what the needs are.
And Letitia's already beginning to work on that with Daniel and independently, just with her team, to start to look at the dynamic of service delivery. Because we also had then newcomers come in, like we were saying, that require some additional support. So, we're looking at, it's a dynamic model and she has to shift it around. And we've looked at a range of options, all of which we'll present to you. And she'll do her report in the spring and you'll be able to plug it into this picture you have of big picture district numbers and then program numbers, and then how we build the budget.
And then just to add on to Yakub's point, which I agree with, it would be interesting to know how many of those students need additional services, but separately within this presentation to just know how many students, how much of an increase in students we have that have additional needs. I know that's a separate presentation and we see it later, but it's also something interesting to look at because I would think that in terms of cost drivers, these are going to be some big cost drivers.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I think, for us, the dynamic of education, which makes it a really enjoyable field, it makes it harder during budgeting. Most of everything we do is really enjoyable and dynamic. But when you're budgeting, you can scope everything and have like 5 new kids, but you could have 1 that cost you $200,000. So the thing about special ed, structural support and requiring additional supports is that it's very individual to the child, and the cost analysis to that is really related to those needs. And, typically you might get, if you look at just sheer percentages of what we know about special education service delivery, it's going to be 15% of the total. So our averages have remained true. Like we do these reports year over year. So when I look at that number, I know 15% of them are going to require special education. So they're going to have a double dose, right? Because that's the average, statistically for us in Westborough.
But that doesn't stand true for the Ls, right? I mean, obviously, you have a huge increase coming in right now that, or,
Well, typically, I mean, right, you're looking at a subset of a group of people when we look at that number. But if you just generalize across the array, you figure, you could shave that down if you want. But I mean, typically, it might be higher, it might be lower. But, the average when we bring in any numbers, we know 15% of them are going to be special education and require extra support. We kind of hold that in our head when we're thinking. Those are great questions.
We good for now?
So this is the process for you to just begin to immerse yourself in the impact that leads to budgeting. Our goal is always going to be to leverage offsets, grants, other cost measures. We have a grant that Daniel utilizes with Letitia to do aspects of our L programming, and sometimes we'll put staff on that. We run staff on the IDEA grant. So when we build the budget, we look at what we need, and then we look at where we can put all of that work to bring in the tightest budget possible. So we're beginning that process, and this is what we need to know, what I need to know when I'm meeting. I need the numbers around the people before I sit with, before Anita and I start kind of trying to crunch those numbers. So, all right. Okay, welcome to budget season.
All right, well, the last thing on the agenda is the town meeting debrief. And
It was the easiest town meeting for us ever.
Yep.
I was the most relaxed at that town meeting, I think.
Well, the good news is that I think the focus was this time on things that other parts of the town needed, and obviously it was a pretty vocal discussion about all of that. And
I was very glad for the turnout. I think at one point there were over 500 people there, especially at the start of the meeting, to talk about the community center, the proposed community center. And I understand that it's really hard for people to come out and commit that amount of time on a Monday night. I think by the time the meeting was done, there were about 100 people left. So, but I'm glad people came. I'm glad that was something they were passionate about. Hallie, thank you for what you did for babysitting and all the student council members. That was really helpful. I think it really, really helped those families who wanted to be there and participate in that discussion.
You guys were busy.
Yeah, there were
Oh
a lot
yeah,
of
we
kids.
had 30 kids.
Yeah, so that's a lot, yeah. And I know parking was difficult, so anyone who came on the later side had, did the best they could. But again, it just shows how important it is to be there, because a lot of the items that were there, if they passed, they didn't pass by much, and if they failed, they didn't really fail by much. So it's really important to be
I
there.
think it's really exciting to see new faces there. I enjoy the complexity when there's a topic that draws people, and I think you see that it tells you something. It tells you people are paying attention, and it tells you that when something hits an area of interest, people will do the work they need to do. And I think to see a whole array of people there who aren't normally there was really great. And it gives us a chance to draw them in and see, this is the operation of your town, and something you should want to do. So I thought it was really great.
Well facilitated by John Arnold
He
once
did a nice
again.
job.
Yeah.
Interestingly, for me, I was walking through the high school the morning after, and I'm in the social studies department, and two of the teachers whose class I just sort of walk in for 5 or 10 minutes, whenever I visit the school. Two of them were debriefing with the students about the town meeting, and going through sort of talking about the vote about the community center and how much it won by, and what people, and engaging the students in a debate about what they thought about that, and also highlighting the fact that so many of the participants left after that vote, and asking again the students what they thought about it. So it was not critical race theory or any ism. It was just focused on what is town meeting about, and how should we think about democracy, and what happened last night. And I thought that was wonderful to see our teachers doing that with the students.
And we've seen more young people coming to town meeting, and I think March town meeting being really an important and dynamic one as well. I think it's really great to see an opportunity to draw them in, so.
Yeah, I know there are teachers that encourage students to go,
Yeah,
or
it's
maybe
good.
make it a requirement. But I do know that a lot of our seniors are going to be turning 18, and so they can participate in March town meeting, so looking
that's
forward to
nice.
that.
All right.
Anybody else? All right, given that, need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, anybody?
I second.
There you go. All those in favor? Very good.
Very good.
Ask me for a second.